Okay, everybody. So tonight is the eve of Rosh Chodesh Adar. Rosh Chodesh Adar means the new month of Adar. The first of the month is what's called Rosh Chodesh, the head of the month. And this particular year, this year is a leap year. And what that means is that there's two Adars. There's two months that are called Adar. Why is that? Well, because the way the Hebrew calendar works is that it is a combination of the lunar calendar, which is primarily how the months work, and then the solar calendar, which is how the days work. As everybody knows, the solar calendar is 365 and a quarter days approximately, and the lunar calendar is only 354 and a bit days. Therefore, according to the lunar calendar, we see 11 days short of the solar year. Therefore, approximately every 3 years, usually a little bit less than that, but every 3 years approximately, we'll have an extra month, because 3 years of 11 days would make 33 days. So then it puts us a little bit ahead of the calendar, and then it falls back again. In any event, in that case where there is where it's the third year, or approximately the third year, there will be two final months of the year. The final month of the year is the month called Adar. That's the last month of the year. And then we have an Adar Aleph and Adar base, a first Adar and a second Adar. Now, the word Adar itself is very significant, because the word Adar, even though it's just the name of a month, but the names of the months were given with certain concepts in mind. One of the concepts in mind is that the word Adar, if I could just share a screen for a minute, a whiteboard, there we go. The name Adar, that's in English, it would be spelled A-D, oops, A-R. Again, I'm writing with a mouse here, which is not the best way to write, and I'm writing right-handed, which is not the best way. I write verted horizontally, but anyway. Okay, in Hebrew, it's called Adar, right? In Hebrew, it would be Adar, like that. So this broken down, various texts explain that the word is broken down. This dar means to dwell, and Aleph stands for Aleph, the numerical value of the Aleph, since the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is 1, Bet would be 2, Gim will be 3, Dal will be 4, and so on and so forth, but 1, in other words, the oneness of God, Dar dwells in this month. Why? Because it's a very special month. In truth, it's a month where the Megillah's Esther, which is what we read in the second Adar. When there's two Adars, we read it in the second Adar. When there's only one Adar, obviously we read it in Adar. This is Megillah's Esther, which is read on the festival of Purim. Now, Purim is a minor festival, minor in the sense that there's no cessation of work required, and so on and so forth. But it's a day of tremendous celebration, because Nahafohu, everything was turned upside down in the month of Adar. In other words, there had been a decree, a very, very serious decree by Haman, or Haman, the wicked Haman HaRosha, against all Jews, whether it was young or old, men and women, children, didn't matter, didn't make any difference. There was a decree of total annihilation of the entire nation. And this was all based on the fact of that Mordechai, who was the leader of the Jewish people at that time, Mordechai would not bow down to Haman. Haman even though he was only the viceroy, he was not the king. The king was Achashverosh, but Achashverosh was apparently, well, the sages referred to him as a bit of a fool. He didn't really realize what was going on. He just lived a good life because he was a king, and he was an emperor. In fact, he was the at that time the Persian Empire was a vast empire, and that had been built up by his forebears. And by the time he got to it, he was a very self-indulgent kind of a person, and didn't really follow what was going on so much. So his viceroy, Haman, was a very evil person. According to our sages, he was the direct descendant of the tribe of Amalek, the Amalekites, The Amalekites, Amalek was a tribe that, after all the miracles that had been done with the exodus of the Jews from Egypt, and the manna in the desert, and so on and so forth, and all the tremendous miracles that happened, the splitting of the sea, and so on and so forth, Amalek nevertheless decided he's going to attack. He's going to attack, and he's going to try and annihilate as many Jews as possible. Of course, he was defeated by Joshua, who was the general of the army, even though Moses was the leader, but Joshua was the general of the army. He was defeated by Joshua, but unfortunately was not wiped out completely, which is what the mitzvah, the requirement is these days, to wipe out completely Amalek. And what Amalek represents, Amalek really represents basically the same idea. Amalek, they say, there are historians and Jewish philosophers that say that Hitler was a descendant of Amalek as well. He was descended from Haman. And therefore he had the same idea: kill everybody, kill every Jew, old and young, men, male, female, children, everybody. Didn't make any difference. Just destroy them completely out of hatred. And the reason for his hatred, for Haman's hatred, for Haman's hatred, was that Mordechai would not bow down to him. Mordechai, being a religious and completely dedicated Jew, in fact, a tzaddik, Mordechai a tzaddik, he was a saintly and righteous person, would only bow down to God. He would not bow down to any king or human of flesh and blood. And this infuriated Haman, who was very egotistical, and he decided to kill off everybody. Unfortunately for Haman, Esther was in the palace. She was married to Achashverosh at the advice of Mordechai. She was married to Achashverosh, and she was the one that eventually caused the entire miracle of Purim to happen. In fact, interestingly enough, the festival of Purim was due to a woman, Esther. In other words, she was the one that made the miracle happen. The festival of Hanukkah was also due to a woman, Yehudis, who chopped off the head of the general that was the Syrian Greek general that was persecuting the Jews at that time. And that led to the festival of Hanukkah, the holiday of Hanukkah. And so to Pesach, Passover was also, this is a Gemara that's actually mentioned in Gemara Megillah, in the Gemara that describes the festival of Purim. Passover was also due to the women. Why? Because when the men were very downhearted and very depressed and very dejected about their inability to get out of slavery, the women were the ones that encouraged them and so on and so forth. It was also Miriam, Moses' sister, that saved Moses, who became the redeemer of the Jews from Egypt. So the festival of Pesach was also due to women, as the Gemara, as the Talmud in Megillah points out. In any event, so the festival of Purim, therefore, is a festival of Nahafochu. It is upside down. Things are turned upside down. And that fits very, very well with the Sefer Yetzirah. The Sefer Yetzirah has every month associated with a tribe. There were 12 tribes at 12 months. And every month also associated with a particular chush, what's called a chush. A chush is usually translated as a sense, but sense doesn't really describe it properly. It's more a sort of a quality or a quality of character, or in fact, it's a power of the soul. It's a talent or a capacity of the soul for certain things. Let me just share a screen with you with the list of the chushim. I'm assuming that you can see this is from Aryeh Kaplan's version of Sefer Yetzirah. It's in Sefer Yetzirah chapter 5, right? Chapter 5, the first Mishnah in chapter 5. And it discusses the names of the month. These are the names of the month: Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shvat, Adar. And as I said before, there can be two Adars. It's the only month in which there can be two of them. And this year, in fact, there are two Adars. So we're just about to enter tomorrow night into the first Adar, but Purim is in the second Adar. Nevertheless, the first Adar is introduced, says the Gemara, both Adars are Misha Nichnas Adar, when Adar comes in other words, with the new month of Adar, Marbim Basimcha, we increase in joy. And the reason for that is because the chush, the talent or the capacity of Adar is the capacity of laughter. Now, when we call them senses, or chushim is usually translated as senses, but the Sefer Yetzirah points out that we have 12 senses, not just the 5 senses that are known to Western philosophy, I guess, or Western medicine, or Western whatever you want to call it. In other words, seeing, hearing, tasting, etc., the 5 senses that we have. So the senses according to the here are the senses according to the Sefer Yetzirah. Nisan, the first month of the year, is the quality or the talent, the power of speech. ER is thought. Sivan, he translates here as action, but that's actually incorrect. I hate to pick a bone with Aryeh Kaplan or say that he's incorrect, but it is incorrect because the month as it's described in Sefer Yetzirah is called Hiluch. I think it's just a misprint because action comes in again later in over here, as you can see. In any event, the third month, the month of Sivan, has to do with Hiluch. Hiluch means progress, literally walking, but the ability to progress from one level to another. All of these ideas over here that we're talking about are not necessarily faculties of the soul, although they are also faculties of the soul, but they're much deeper faculties than the faculty, let's say, for example, the faculty of speech. The faculty of speech isn't just the ability to speak, it's the ability to communicate in many different ways. All ways of communication are included in speech, right? Similarly, thought, there's many, many different levels of thought. There's thought about things outside of yourself. There's thought about yourself, and there's thought about things that are above yourself, and so on and so forth. There's all kinds of different actions that are associated with thought. Similarly, when it comes to the month of Sivan is the ability to progress, to move forward. It's the concept of hiluch, moving forward. The month of Sivan was a month in which the Torah was given, the 10 Commandments, on the 6th of Sivan, or according to some, the 7th of Sivan, but the regular view is the 6th of Sivan, 6th day of the month of Sivan. And that gave us the ability to progress ad infinitum, in other words, infinite progression. That is the month of Sivan. Tammuz is the month of sight. Now, again, sight doesn't necessarily only mean sight. It means the ability to, it also means, because sight corresponds to Chokhmah, the sphere of Chokhmah in the Sfirot. The sphere of Chokhmah doesn't only correspond to sight, but it corresponds to inspiration, right? So the idea of sight, to be able to see something, is also the ability to be inspired. So for instance, a person who is blind, how does he doesn't seem to have the faculty of sight, but the truth is he does. He has the faculty of inspiration in his soul, she. Obviously, the same thing was with hearing. Hearing is, what about a deaf person that can't hear at all? Hearing is not only necessarily only to be able to hear with your ears, but it's also the concept of understanding. And then finally, Elul is action. That corresponds to the idea of maaseh, or action, as it is mentioned in the Hebrew version. And Tishrei is coition. Coition means cohabitation, tashmish, the ability to be together with a member of, I hate to say it, a member of the opposite gender, the opposite sex. In other words, men and women together. That's called proper coition. And it corresponds to the tribe of Ephraim. Some say it corresponds to the tribe of Joseph. Ephraim and Manasseh were 2 sons of Joseph who were included amongst the tribes. But if we include them as 2 tribes, then we leave out Levi, so Levi. So Levi corresponds to where Manasseh is, and Joseph corresponds to where Ephraim is. And then there's, again, 12 tribes. So the concept of smell or scent is associated with Manasseh, or with Levi. And that fits much more with Levi because Levi was the one who, the Levites were the ones who worked in the temple, and they were involved with sacrifices. And certain section of the Levites, the Kohanim, the high priest, the priest and the high priest, were also from the tribe of Levi. In any event, Kislev, the month of Kislev, is a month that's deep in the winter, corresponds to the month of sleep. Tevet corresponds to the month of anger and the tribe of Dan. Shvat corresponds to taste. And finally, Adar corresponds to the concept of laughter. Now, we have to understand when we talk about the idea of laughter, what do we really mean? What does laughter mean? So laughter always comes about as a result of things being the opposite of what we thought they were. Something's funny when it comes out the opposite result of the way you were expecting, opposite to your expectations. That's really the concept of laughter. Okay, so that's what the month is associated with. Now, when we're talking about the new month, a new month coming in, a new month is a whole concept in and of itself, a very important concept in and of itself, the concept of what is called Rosh Chodesh. In the in the parsha called Bo, Moses is told, Moshe Rabbeinu is told, Rosh Chodesh. The month of Nisan is the first of that, as you noted, as we noted previously in the table over there. Nisan is the first month. So the month of Nisan is the head of all the months, and that begins the cycle of the months, and that ends with the month of Adar. Adar is the 12th month, and in a leap year, it's the 12th and 13th months when the moon cycle and the sun cycle are brought back into sync. When there's a leap year, the moon cycle and the sun cycle are brought back into sync. I just want to talk for a moment about the concept of Rosh Chodesh, the concept of the new moon, the new month, when the new moon first becomes visible. Now, biblically, today, of course, we do it according to calculations, but biblically, the way it was always done was witnesses would come to the temple in Jerusalem, to the Beis HaMikdash. They would come to the temple in Jerusalem, and they would there in the temple, they would be interviewed by the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was like the Supreme Court of the Jewish people at that time, the Sanhedrin. And the Sanhedrin would interview these people and ask them certain questions. And why? Because it could happen that a person could make a mistake, that what he thought he saw was the moon was in fact some other phenomenon. Could be maybe a cloud that was lit up, or it could be that it was an illusion. As you probably know, for example, Aurora Borealis, I think it's called, the lights in the sky, usually above cold countries, these lights in the sky might look like, sometimes they might look like the moon, but therefore the Beit Din would examine the witnesses. There had to be two witnesses, two people had to come and testify that they saw the new moon, and then they would declare it the new month. Of course, there was also a period of time when the Sadducees, the Tzedukim, tried to ensure that we would not celebrate the festivals in a proper time, and therefore they came with false testimony that they saw the moon on a certain day, and their testimony had to be examined quite carefully to make sure that these people who were coming to as witnesses were not Sadducees, Tzedukim. So in any event, the announcement of the month was made after two witnesses came. One of the questions that the witnesses were asked, a very interesting question, the witnesses were asked, where exactly is the moon in relation to, you know what, I had some pictures here and I think I went and closed them, darn. All right, just one second. Let me just find this again here. All the phases of the moon. Yeah, here we go. Phases of the moon. Sorry, I had this picture up and I closed it for some odd reason. In any event, here we go. So these are the phases of the moon. All right. Okay, here we go. Let me just share screen with you so you can see. Actually, I had a much better picture, but this one will do. Here is the sun. Okay, as you can see, here's the sun. I'm assuming everyone can see the picture. Here's the sun, and then the new moon is, the moon is initially dark, right? Completely dark. In other words, the sun does not shine on the moon at all, right? The moon is completely dark for, it's more, it's not necessarily for a long period of time, but nevertheless, there's a point at which the moon is completely dark. There's no sunlight illuminating the moon. Then this here, this picture is actually incorrect, believe it or not. 1 second here. Just see 1 second. I'll go back over there for it. Incorrect. I'm sorry. This particular picture here is, yeah, this is the right one. This is correct. Okay. Okay. What was correct about it, you'll soon find out. And what was incorrect about the previous one, they had the waxing crescent the wrong way. Here's the sun, right? The sun is not moving, even though it appears to us, obviously, that the sun moves from east to west. But that's the Earth turning around on its own axis, obviously. But nevertheless, the sun remains rigid, remains in one place, and illuminates the moon. The new moon is when there's no light, and then a waxing crescent. In other words, when the moon, the crescent of the moon first starts to be visible, this is when the witnesses would come in and they would say they saw a sliver of the moon, right? They saw a sliver of the moon. So then the sages would ask them, where was the sliver? Was the sliver facing the sun, or was the dark part facing the sun? And according to their answer, they would know. There was many other questions, but according if they answered this wrong, then we know that they were either mistaken or lying. Why? Says one of the great teachers of the oral Torah, Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says the sun never ever saw the pagima of the moon. The sun never saw the blemish of the moon. Now, this is called when the moon has no light, it's called a blemish. Why is it called a blemish? Well, the Midrash gives us an answer. The Midrash says that initially, when God created the world in the beginning of creation in Genesis, it says that He created it Shnei Ha'ma'oros Hagadolim, the two great luminaries. So, what were the two great luminaries? The sun and the moon. Those were the two great luminaries. But the moon came with a question before. This obviously it's not meant literally, but the moon came with a question before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, before God, and said as follows: it's not possible for two kings to wear the same crown, right? You can't have two kings wearing the same crown. We can't both have the same light and both be considered kings. So God said to the moon, go and reduce yourself. And that's why the moon became reduced and has no light of its own. The only light that the moon has is the light that it accepts, that it receives from the sun. Now, this has been explained in various Kabbalistic and particularly in Hasidic texts, that the moon was, obviously, again, this is all a metaphor, but the moon had said that I will willingly volunteer to be a lesser luminary than the sun by accepting the light of the sun, but I accept upon myself to be a lesser luminary. Now, this is extremely important because the sun is always compared to men and the moon is compared to women. So a woman waxes and wanes, and a man is supposed to remain the way it is. But it's not only man and woman. In more technical terms, in Kabbalistic terms, the sun represents Zera and Pin, the 6 Sfirot from Chesed to Yesod, and the moon represents Malchut, Malchus. Malchut doesn't have any light of its own. The only light that it has is the light that's poured into it from Zeir Anpin, from the cluster of Sfirot called Zeir Anpin. In other words, the cluster of Sfirot from Chesed to Yesod. The moon has no light of its own, but it receives light. So therefore, the sun and the moon are paradigms of the giver and the receiver, or what's called in Hebrew the mashpia and the makabel, right? The giver and the receiver. So Rabbi Yochanan explains that one of the questions that the Sanhedrin, this Jewish court, the Supreme Court would ask the witnesses was the crescent facing the sun, or was the crescent on the other side of the sun? In the previous picture, if you have a look over here, in the previous picture, they got it wrong. The waxing crescent is, if this is the sun over here, the waxing crescent is on the wrong side. This is not correct. This is actually the waning crescent, and that's the waxing crescent, right? So I don't know, they got it wrong, but nevertheless, we're not going according to that picture. We're going according to this one, and therefore, so Rabbi Yochanan said as follows: the sun never saw the pegima, the blemish of the moon. Again, what's the blemish of the moon? The dark side of the moon. The sun never saw the dark side of the moon. Why? Because the sun always illuminates. The illuminated part of the moon is always facing the sun. Obviously, to be illuminated, if the crescent was on the other side, what's illuminating it? It's the sun that has to illuminate the moon, and that crescent, therefore, is always facing the sun. So, a Hasidic insight into this idea is that we're talking again about a mashpia and a makabel, a giver and a receiver, a leader and a disciple. The proper idea of a leader is that he never sees the blemish of the one receiving from him. On the contrary, his entire goal is to light up the receiver, to light up the moon in this case. The sun lights up the moon, first a crescent and then a first quarter, and then the moon, 3/4 of a moon, and eventually it becomes a full moon. So the idea is that a true leader, a true teacher, a true spiritual leader, obviously, is one who does not see the blemish in his disciples, in his followers. In those, on the contrary, he always looks for the light in them, so to speak. Where can he light the person up? And that becomes a whole way of doing things, an incredibly important way of doing things. The way of the disciples of the Baal Shem Tov and the Baal Shem Tov himself, and then subsequently the disciples of the Baal Shem Tov, was to do exactly this thing, to light up the students, so to speak, with their best qualities, to light up their best talents. This fits very well with what we're talking about, that the chushim, the senses, what's translated usually as the senses, are of the month, are actually not just senses, they're capacities. These 12 capacities of the month that we described before, these 12 capacities of the month are found in every soul. They're not always revealed. Sometimes they have to be revealed by particular actions. There's a beautiful word, an idea that we have from someone who is named Mordechai of, what was it? Mordechai of, not Yeshchiz. I forget what this, it just slips my mind now. Not Mordechai of Chernobyl, no. Dennis, I'll come to your question soon. I'll come to it at the end if you don't mind. Let us just continue with the story. This Hasidic Rebbe once said the following. There's a verse in the prayer called Ashrei, which is Psalms 145, right? It's primarily Psalms 145 with an additional verse from the previous, from 144 at the beginning. In any event, one of the verses in Ashrei, in this prayer called Ashrei, one of the verses in Psalm 145 says, "Lohodia libnei ha'adam gvuroisav," to inform mankind about, this is the simple, straightforward explanation, about his might, his with a capital H, his, God's might, God's mighty deeds. Lohodia libnei ha'adam, to inform mankind regarding gvuroisav, the mighty deeds and the mighty capacities, the might of God, the might of HaKadosh Baruch of Hashem, of the Almighty. Rav Mordechai Avlechovich, that's who it was. So Rav Mordechai Avlechovich said, no, we have to, there's another interpretation as well. God makes things happen in a person's life, in order to make known to a person his own abilities, his own capacities, his own talents, his own places where he can shine. And again, that's exactly what we were talking about before. The sun does not see the dark side of the moon. It only sees the light side of the moon. And the reason for that is because that's what it emphasizes, it tries to bring out, so to speak, in a spiritual sense, bring out the light side of the receiver, of the makabel, of the student, of the disciple, etc., etc. So the idea, therefore, says Rav Mordechai Avlechovich, is that a person goes through certain circumstances in his life, his or her life, to accentuate and highlight those talents that a person has. And in fact, we have all of the 12 talents that are spoken about there, all the 12 capacities. Some people are more hidden. One is more emphasized and others more hidden, and others it's the opposite way around. We all have the capacity for laughter. And that laughter has to be brought to the fore. This is the month for bringing that laughter. In other words, for looking at things from the opposite point of view. Don't look at it from the dark side. Look at it from the light side. As humor is always called the lighter side, right? The light side of things, and that's where it is really. It's the concept of light, the concept of illumination of an idea that would seem to have been the opposite, and all of a sudden it's revealed, and that's what causes the laughter. Now, there's a story that of a certain student who was in a yeshiva. A yeshiva is a school, for a religious school for teaching Talmud and so on and so forth. They do teach in some yeshivas, they teach other subjects as well, but the main subject in most yeshivas is Talmud, and then approaches to life and so on and so forth. And in Hasidic yeshivas, they teach Hasidic teachings as well. In any event, the main diet, so to speak, of people in yeshiva is Talmud. So there was a certain boy who was in a yeshiva this was in New York, and he was a live wire. He's one of these kids that has a tremendous, they're just naughty by nature. They're disobedient, they're naughty, and so on. So it wasn't malicious. It was just, that was his nature. He was always looking to make, to make lively. He was a live wire, basically. And that he always was wanting to. So anyway, he managed his first couple of years in yeshiva or whatever it is, but they said to his father at a certain point in time, you know what, he's not for us. It's time to, time for him to move on. He's not for us. He's too much of a live wire. He's too, how shall we say it? Too unorthodox in his approach to life. So please find him another place. So the father, with no other choice, finds him a different yeshiva. Same thing happened in his second yeshiva, third yeshiva, fourth yeshiva, fifth yeshiva, until he been through 8 yeshivas, been through 8 seminaries, 8 schools, and they all threw him out. The father by this time was exasperated. He was completely at a loss, at his wit's end. He didn't know what to do. So he said to the boy, you know what? I'm buying you a ticket to Israel. I'll give you, any funds that you need from me. They're available. Off you go. I'm sending you off. Pack your bags. You're going to Israel, and you're going to find yourself a yeshiva. you will find yourself a place to learn, a place that you're happy with, and so on and so forth. I've reached my wit's end. There's nothing we can do anymore in America. I'm sending you to Israel. Anyway, the boy goes, he lands in Bnei Brak. He lands in Tel Aviv airport. And the closest religious city where there's lots of yeshivas is Bnei Brak. It's very close to Tel Aviv. So he decides he's going to go to Bnei Brak. But he arrived like early in the morning. By the time he gets to Bnei Brak, it's already late morning. And he drops into a synagogue. He finds a synagogue open. He drops into the synagogue, into a shul, and he goes to to recite the morning prayers. He goes to Daven Shachris. In the shul, in this synagogue called the shul in Yiddish. In the shul is this elderly man, an old man, and he was still at his prayers. And when he finished, he and the boy finished more or less the same time. So he asked the boy, "Who are you? Where do you come from? What are you doing?" And so on and so forth. So the boy told him his story. He said, I've been thrown out of 8 yeshivas in America, and my father sent me here to try yeshiva in Israel. So the old man told him this idea that we mentioned before from Rabbi Mordechai Blechovich, where he says to to the boy, the verse, Lo adir livnei Adam gureisav, which we translated as to make known to man his, with a capital H, his might. But Reb Mordechai Blechovich interprets it to make man known to man his own might, his own talents, his own capacities, his own areas in which he can shine. So the boy heard it, and it was a nice idea. And then he left. He went looking for yeshiva. Went to another yeshiva. I found the yeshiva in Bnei Brak. This was his 9th yeshiva, and lo and behold, he didn't last for more than a few months. And I said to him, "Arrivederci, goodbye." So he left and went to Jerusalem, and where there's also a lot of yeshivas. He went to a yeshiva in Jerusalem. The same thing happened. This is the 12th yeshiva already. The 12th yeshiva gets thrown out. He was obviously a real live wire, a sense of humor and so on and so forth. They couldn't deal with him. So he gets thrown out of yeshiva in Jerusalem. Now he's like devastated. He's been through 12 yeshivas. His poor father, his poor parents. He's just an embarrassment to everybody. He's not making it. He's done. He decides he's going to climb up to one of the tall buildings in Jerusalem. He finds a building, a tall building that he can get to the roof, and he's going to take his own life. Basically, he's going to jump from the building. As he was about to jump from the building, he remembered this teaching that the old man had told him in the synagogue, and said to him, "What about revealing your own powers? God puts you in a situation so you can reveal your own powers." He thought about this and he thought about this, and he decided, you know what? I haven't tried that path yet. Let me try that. And whatever he did, I don't know. I don't know exactly how the story panned out, but he told the story later when he was happily married, living back in America, happily married, living a religious life with 3 children, and he was a very happy person. How was he happy? Because he thought about himself as not being a disaster, but that his mission in life was to reveal these capacities, and he did. He became a very successful businessman, and helped many other people as well. The moral of the story is that we have to bring out our own best qualities, our own best talents, and even those talents which we don't even know about, the 12 chushim, the 12 talents that I mentioned before, the 12 capacities that everybody has, but correspond to each of the 12 months. We have to work on those and bringing those to the fore, even if we don't know that we have them. That is the secret of Rosh Chodesh. The whole concept of Rosh Chodesh is to allow ourselves, as the dark part of ourselves, to be illuminated by the sun. In other words, to be illuminated by a spiritual guide that looks only, not any spiritual guide, only a spiritual guide who looks for the light in you, who doesn't look for the darkness, doesn't look at the darkness and criticize it. He looks at the light and seeks to increase the light as the moon becomes brighter and brighter as the month proceeds until it gets to full moon. So that was the story. And that is the concept of laughter as well. Laughter is when things turn out the opposite way that you thought they would turn out. In other words, you were looking at the dark side, and then you discover the light side, and the light side is what causes laughter. At the time of Purim, what was that? There was a decree of Haman to destroy all the Jewish people. In the end, the only one that was destroyed, not the only one, the ones that were destroyed were Haman, his 10 sons, his entire family, and all his henchmen. They were the ones that were destroyed and gotten rid of forever. And so therefore, the month of Adar is the month of laughter. It's the month of joy, and the month in which we have to celebrate our capacity for laughter. That's what we're heading towards. And this month, since it is a double month of Adar, because the lunar cycle has to catch up with the solar cycle, so we have 2 Adars, so we have double portion, 2 months of laughter. Laughter is, as everybody says, the best medicine, and that is the thing that can heal even the worst illnesses. There's many stories about that kind of thing, but that is the truth. Okay, let me answer a couple of questions over here. Since we learn from the experience of others, why do most Kabbalah classes separate women and men, separate women and men studying and discussing together? The straightforward answer, the answer that is given in the Code of Jewish Law and so on and so forth, this is a matter of modesty. Men and women, if they're not married or they're not part of the same family, there's a certain discreteness that has to operate between men and women. I'll give you an example. For instance, if I have, let's say I have a female cleaner in my house, which I do, like once a week, we have a cleaner that comes to clean the house. Now, I work mostly from home, but my wife is at work. She's a teacher. And so what I do when the cleaner is here, I make sure that the doors are not locked. The front door and the side door are not locked, because to be alone with a woman who is not your wife, who is not your daughter or your sister or your mother or whatever it is, not a relative, is a problem, right? And even though there's not even a thought that would enter my mind to do anything improper or inappropriate, nevertheless, that is the law, and therefore I follow it, right? You leave the door unlocked, so that, in other words, anyone could barge in or she could run out if necessary. The same thing applies, particularly when we're coming to divine wisdom. And in the idea of divine wisdom, a certain amount of discretion is required, not only between men and women, but the truth is that a lot of divine wisdom is discreet and secluded from public knowledge. Now, things have changed somewhat in the last, let's say, the last couple of decades, largely as a result of the spread of Hasidic teachings, particularly from Lubavitch and Chabad and so on, but not exclusively. And there's just a certain amount of decorum that is required, and therefore classes generally are separated, especially when it comes to talking about the concept of unifying the Sfirot together. The metaphor that is always used in the concept of unifications, which are called yichudim, and also zivugim. Zivugim literally means coitus, means relations between a man and a woman. It's called a zivug, right? When man and women. So a lot of the meditations, in order to be able to explain them, use the metaphor of male and female, and male and female coming together. Therefore, it would be inappropriate for men and women to be in the same class, largely. There is an interesting story that Rabbi Chaim Vital was the one who wrote down the teachings of the Arizal. The Arizal is the master Kabbalist from the 1500s, who was the father, so to speak, of modern Kabbalah. So he wrote very little himself. Most of what he wrote was recorded, and most of what he taught was recorded by Rabbi Chaim Vital. So the story is told that the Baal Shem Tov once ascended. Excuse me a second, just let me take a sip of tea here. It says the Baal Shem Tov once ascended on high, and he asked Rabbi Chaim Vital, why is it that he always used the metaphor of men and women, of man and woman? In other words, the and zivug and their coitus, their sexual relations, in order to be able to explain things in Kabbalah. Why didn't you use a different metaphor? So the story is told that Reb Chaim Vital in heaven handed the Baal Shem Tov a pen or a quill, and he said to it, if you can do better, go ahead. Now, Hasidic legend has it that the pen that Rabbi Chaim Vital gave to the Baal Shem Tov was the soul of the first Rebbe of Lubavitch, the first Rebbe of Chabad, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who, amongst all the students of the Maggid Mesrich, who was the successor to the Baal Shem Tov, of all the students, he was the one that spoke and taught and wrote at greatest length and with lots of explanation and so on and so forth. In other words, he was the one that really opened up Kabbalah to the masses, to the public. Kabbalah as it's clothed within the teaching of Hasidism, of Hasidus. But nevertheless, he was the one that sort of opened the door more than anybody else. Nevertheless, we still use those metaphors, and therefore it's better to keep men and women separate when teaching. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily completely separate. They could be in the same class, just that there should be, two distinct groups, the group of men and the group of women, and not sitting together, not, of course, if it's all one family, it doesn't matter, but generally that's the way it is done in a synagogue type situation or in a public forum. Usually men will sit on one side and women on the other, sometimes with a curtain between them or something like that, sometimes not, but in any event, that is the story. Laurie asked, was it really that important? I'm not sure what you're referring to, Laurie. Perhaps you could just explain your question. I still think that life is sort of creation is how we shattered so we can come together again, and that's an interesting observation. Wasn't really our laugh that caused it, but how we become shattered. I think that would be the position of the moon. I see. Yeah, the position of the moon is very important. The exact position of the moon is very important because we had to know that the moon was now illuminated in order for it to be the beginning of a new month. We know that there's a phase when the moon is completely dark, and that's the end, that signals the end of the previous month. And when the light shines on the moon again, that's the beginning of the new month. And therefore, the position of the moon is critical to be able to know exactly where, exactly how the sun illuminates the moon. And obviously, in their testimony, whether it was honest or not honest, or whether it was mistaken or not mistaken. I hope that answers the question. I think. Okay. Any other questions, folks? All right. Seems that not. Enjoy the month of Adar, and enjoy the 2 months of Adar, and may it be full of joy and laughter of the best sort. You are very welcome, Dennis, and everybody else, and Elimelech, and so on. Okay, folks, I'm going to end the class now. I will have it up. Thank you very much, Alan. Shabbat Shalom. Enjoy the family reunion. Thank you very much. Yes, I will. Great time with the family. We will indeed. Thank you very much. And then things will return next week to normal, hopefully. All righty. Have a good one. This will be up on YouTube in probably an hour or so. All the best.